I'll just compare it. There's nothing about this. Substitute. No. That. This one, oh, micro. Oh, yeah. Per grant, it should be. It was just not. I didn't see anything about the C. C wasn't in there. Abby, will you present this?
Yeah, I've got it to present.
Good. These. Yeah.
Hi, Cody. You have a spot.
Just for you, we even got you a tag.
You want to make sure you have a microphone so they can.
Well, yeah, I just want to check it there because I'm with my order.
That is the talk going around. Again,
Yeah.
congratulations.
Yeah.
Hopefully you begin to good payouts.
I need it, yeah.
Unless the digital back.
So we can expect you to start speaking friendly about operators now?
Yeah. Well, no, I'm gonna put y'all in business because I'm also, like, have a lot of input in the hemp industry. I've got a couple partners there, so.
Oh, good.
So.
You're really diverse in your holdings.
Right, yeah.
Financial planning.
That next is some hookers and some.
Busy man.
You're right.
Hi, Nanette. I think we have you on the end of this table. We only have 4 in person today, 2 online.
So, what role was that state change in?
29.
29.
You'd be very consistent.
That should say something to the amount of.
Divided by 3.
Yeah, divided by 3.6.
You're gonna post.
How are you?
It says the host is
Good.
talking. It's good to see you. Why is it showing me and not the board?
Let me just double.
You think? So anyone typing in the chat or because folks will join in and then they'll take over the board.
How did we do it last time?
Great question.
Rich was able to get one.
Let's try again. So if I go on here, maybe there's some setting for you to pin your screen. And it's go to you. And you, and hopefully that'll. Disappear. What happened? Everything up there.
Trevor, did you guys get it?
Because the copy we got online did not have
The milligram rule.
Updated,
Yeah.
as in what came out yesterday?
Yeah, so they wanted to add something that, for, you know, we have to get the cartridges tested for heavy metals.
Yeah.
You want to allow us to essentially allow the producer to provide us some type of certificates, we don't have to get them tested, so say.
It'd be under 20, that's 4. Yeah.
I just want to make sure you have that.
Yeah, and that's.
Let's check it out.
Do you want? She in Northern Utah though? Yeah. Well, she said, well, I mean.
If he sent it yesterday to Abby, it should be up there.
Posted all the 3 notices he sent.
Dash 29, 28. Here we go. So that's in here on one, but
They just let me log in.
so do we have a new version of it?
Yeah, I can email it to you.
Are you trying to get on the Wi-Fi? Yes. If you go to CapNet, it doesn't require a login, you just have to click it and then click like accept.
Okay, yeah, like it was a big purple button, I didn't pay attention,
But
And, it's eating out.
I saw an email come through today, mentioning you guys, so.
Well, we had like 15 items, we did
Yeah.
parent batches we added, and then Delia has to get all this one finished like so. And again, it's in the middle of the delivery.
well, it's like a.
We need to post the new version of the 68-28. So it's the document that also deals with the milligrams per serving. I think, yeah, Cody, if you can send it to me and Abby, we'll get it posted.
I just sent it to you.
Oh, great. That, I can go run and print copies, but it sounds like it's not something we need copies for. So, yeah, awesome.
I'm not concerned at the moment.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, less testing costs for us, so. I think I'm sure it has to be bigger, but everyone else is, that's the cost for each product.
But I can't provide you with it.
Yeah. Get it tested.
But that's currently in the local anyway. So it's okay.
All of it.
Sure. How are you?
Good, how are you?
What's that? We got a new document we had to put in.
Oh, okay.
Cody, which subsection in 28-4?
It's 10, it's just number 10.
Yeah,
There'll be that, just add a couple more words to say that they'll be separate, but certificate of performance.
Got it.
yeah.
Thank you, Evan. And maybe then,
Yeah.
put that in where you got all the stuff that we're gonna present. So we have an updated copy. We should be good to go. Yeah.
Wow. Handouts, great.
Trevor's in the budget.
Oh, yeah,
So we can call meetings to order as over a week.
I bet there's one in the DEQ room. Go steal that one. Yeah. They got the diet and everything over there.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think that together yesterday.
Yeah. Jeremiah says it's hard to hear. Jeremiah, if we speak up, can you hear us decently?
No, no, yeah.
Jackie voices.
Right.
Get the, microphone, did he turn that on?
You know, I don't know if we can adjust it from the control panel.
We were doing it earlier, it's fine.
Yeah, it was working just fine. So as long as one person's talking, we don't sound like a garbled mess.
And we can, just remind when people are speaking from here.
Beautiful.
At this point, I'm not.
Could be expecting Amber.
Amber.
Yeah, Amber should join virtually soon. It would be with the part Zoom until we start. Lower helps. But we do have these forums, either online or combined with this here. We don't have any forum.
No one, okay.
We're just expecting Misty and Daz.
Yeah.
And Daz got back, she said 15 minutes ago, I'm turning virtually.
Okay. So she should be doing.
I don't know if 801243 is, but it's not the numbers I have for that.
I'll read it.
Okay. Like, that's your.
All right. We just have to tie it while we wait for others to join.
I will give.
You text you.
No,
I don't text Michelle, so you
okay.
take care of those.
What happened?
The empty worker.
Oh. Tyler's up now.
Their list is saying the one on the Google Meet is being funky. Tell Dad and
Yeah.
On Google Meet?
the one that I sent, or like the Google calendar invite, so tell them to do it from the public notice website, the agenda we sent them.
Like it's a different.
No, the link you just sent from the Google calendar, it's like working weird.
Ready to go. Yeah.
Okay, I'll call this meeting to order. Welcome everybody to the second monthly medical cannabis policy advisory board. Just like to read the introductory message and then we'll get started. So this meeting is being held virtually and is hosted by the Utah Department of Health and Human Services Center for Medical Cannabis based in Salt Lake City, Utah. Public notice of this meeting was provided as required under Utah's open meeting laws and was posted on the Utah Public Notice website. In compliance with Utah's open meetings law, this meeting is being recorded. A recording of this meeting will be posted to the Utah Public Notice website no later than 3 business days following the date of this meeting. A rough draft copy of the unapproved written minutes will be posted to the Public Notice website within 30 days of this meeting. Approved minutes will be posted to the Utah Public Notice website no later than 3 business days after the board. Okay, so the first order of business is to approve the minutes of the July 2023 meeting. Did everybody have a chance to review those minutes prior to the meeting? Yes. Does anybody have any proposed changes? Okay, well, I will take a motion to approve.
Chair, make a motion, move or approve the minutes.
Second that motion.
All right, we have a motion to approve the minutes as well as a second. All of those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Trevor, can we get Dennis?
Absolutely. Are they? Do we have Daz unmuted?
The chat.
Okay, I'm unmuted.
Des, what's your vote for approving the minutes?
Yes, aye.
Well,
We don't have Misty on yet, but you have a quorum.
you 5 support, yeah, but the bylaw said 6 support.
No, 5.
5.
It's a majority.
Sounds good. Okay, the next item of business is the board administrative business. We're going to talk about the public comment procedure. So we did post on the public notice website some directions regarding public comment, which are up on the screens here in front of us. But I figured we can talk about one of these things. So Okay. So the Medical Cannabis Policy Advisory Board values input from constituents to take public comment on all discussion items before the board for review and consideration. Please follow these instructions to provide public comment. Public comments will be limited to 2 minutes per person. If you want more time, you must request it from the board chair. Chair may accept or reject requests for additional time. A public comment period is not guaranteed every meeting. The chair has the authority to create or remove the public comment period from the agenda or during the meeting. Please state your name, your affiliation when making a public comment, and your affiliation when making a public comments be reflected in the meeting minutes. To make a public comment over Zoom, use the Zoom webinar link that is provided in the document. The Zoom public chat will be disabled during public board meetings, and only the host will be able to see your comments. The chair will indicate the time for the public comment period. The public comment portion of the meeting begins. Do not raise your hand on Zoom. Instead, send a message in the chat and we'll go directly to the host of the meeting. The chair will indicate when it's your turn to speak, allow you to turn on your microphone and camera. You'll have 2 minutes to make your comment. To make a public comment in person, sign in on the public comment sign-in sheet with your name and indicate whether you would like to make a comment. Chair will indicate when it's time for the public comment period. Chair will indicate when it's your turn. We'll come up to the public comment table to speak. You'll have 2 minutes to make your comment. For additional information, to make a suggestion for agenda items or to contact board members or DHHS or UDAP staff, you can send an email to MCPAB, MCPAB @Utah. All right. Well, the next item of business is to discuss amongst the board members the bylaws. Did everybody have a chance to review the edited bylaws? Does anyone have any proposed changes to the revised bylaws? Des, any proposed changes to the revised bylaws?
Sounds like it's not allowing to.
Sorry, it keeps muting her and unmuting her.
I don't think we have her approved, so it's like each time you have to ask. There she is.
Yeah, I reviewed them a little bit last night. On first glance, I didn't see anything that I need to change.
Okay, and I don't have any changes. The changes that we recommended to be made were made and appear in red throughout the bylaws. So with that, I would entertain a motion to approve bylaws as revised August 9th, 2023.
I would say I will that we vote on bylaws.
We have a second? All right, so the motion to approve the bylaws as revised as of August 9th, 2023. There's been a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Okay.
Any opposed? All right, that motion passes unanimously. We have now adopted bylaws for the policy advisory board. Okay, that brings us to item number 5 on our agenda, which is the servings and milligram per serving labeling for orally administered medical cannabis products. This is a continuation of a discussion that we had during the last meeting. Just as a recap, the board discussed and advised UDAP on drafting an administrative rule consistent with our discussions, and I believe that rule is going to be presented to us today. So with that, I will turn it over to Cody James for his portion of the presentation.
Thank you, JD. And Cody James, I'm the Deputy Director of the Industrial Hemp and Medical Cannabis Division of the Utah Department of Agriculture and Food. As JD mentioned, based on the conversation from the last board meeting, as well as multiple emails and calls from patients advocates, as well as pharmacy providers. The department has come up with proposed language in the rule. It's small changes UDF definitely wants the patients to receive the information that they feel that they need and that they do need in order to be able to take this medicine properly and in safe and understandable dosages. So if the board wouldn't mind looking at the rule R6828, which is the processor rule, cannabis processing, and the first change would actually be under R6828-2 definitions, where UDF is proposing adding advertised cannabinoid to the definitions that would mean a cannabinoid listed on the product base. And the second portion of that rule change is we're talking about milligrams per survey, would be on R6828-14. And looking down at all the way down to 12, the labeling and packaging of cannabis product. 12 refers to the cannabis fact panel for cannabis derivative products. Shall include obviously a list of information, but the addition would be for products intended to be ingested, the amount of total THC and any advertised cannabinoid in milligrams per square. So again, really two lines added to the rule. One is that define advertised cannabinoids, and secondly, what was to be listed on that fact panel, including total THC as well as advertised cannabinoids on the product base. With that, I guess I should say that all items in each of those sections would below the addition would also be renumbered or changed based on alphabetical order.
Thanks, Cody. I'll bring it back to the board for discussion. I do have one question, and actually the two questions, and then I'll open it up to the rest of the board. So where it talks about the amount of total THC, that's where we would be performing the conversion, correct? To make sure that we get the amount of total THC. For instance, live resin gummies and raws gummies are going to have THC, and we would do that with a conversion there. Okay. And then my other thing is, we talked about last time about requiring processors to include with liquid products, whether it be tincture or liquid suspension, some type of administration device, whether it be a pipette or a dropper. I did not see that in the proposed rule.
Yeah, we did not add that in there because there was still some debate on what people wanted on there. And honestly, I think that's a consumer choice issue. Like if there are brands that are making a good one that they feel comfortable using, I myself would not want a pipette that had meat on. I want a pure glass one, but other people want to be able to see the application parts on their work clearly. So I think we can make that a super choice that there's no harm caused by it by having a different administration device as long as that's labeled for the program for the still on.
Okay, those are my questions. Anybody else on the board? Any discussion or questions?
Maybe I can follow up on that question about a measuring device. Are there some of those products that should be having a measuring device that aren't being provided? Or is there a requirement to provide some sort of measuring
There's
device?
currently no requirement to provide.
So they potentially could get one of those without a measuring device.
And what you'll more likely see is your tinctures will have measuring devices with them because of the design of a lot of those things. And your couple of liquid suspension products may not.
And I think we did have public comment last meeting that there have been instances where, whether it's due to supply chain or kind of just where it was purchased, that there were some droppers that weren't light, or it's late, it could be laser etched or whatever, but it's so light that it's difficult to actually see for those. So I think that's kind of where the concern is I know we have some languages in the rules where legibility and like size of font, is that something that we can be addressed?
I don't think it's usually an issue of the size of the font. That's the only restriction we have in place. It's more about the depth of visibility on, and it's really hard to do those things well. Products. So.
Was there an expected date and when this will be going, oh, on September 7th? I didn't see that there.
And also just a reminder for the people joining online, make sure you, when you speak loudly. There's some difficulty even with the mics that we have going. So Des just chatted me to say, hey, I have a hard time hearing, so try to be a little loud and high speed, and we won't get mad at you for being to each other. And Chair, if I could ask a question. Of course, Cody, for on the definition where it says for products intended to be ingested, and that's for THC, for products intended to be ingested, that seems to me of every product that you're about to put into your mouth. And so is that what it's meant? And then we're adding and advertised cannabinoids. I mean, essentially that sounds like it's saying that everything is listed.
Yeah, the department discussed this and tried to prove it was standard in terms of like what, it's almost everything is what you call it.
Right.
And what we came up with was really for the internal definition is taking it on the substance to the mouth intended to go into the gastrointestinal tract. So
Okay.
it starts to take away some of those things that are to help, you know, like that.
For motion.
And start functioning perfect.
Yeah, and if I could just to clarify the question, I had not, they expected to go into that all, I mean, that is the date that we expected to, if it goes according to plan that there are, because it's going to be a comment period for the public and things like that. If we could get any input today, could be that.
And then will it be a similar process that we're kind of following now, whereby as long as your product was packaged before the effective date, you will be allowed to still sell through that without facing any sort of fine or citation warning or anything?
Yeah, that's the policy department follows.
Oh. Yeah, as a consumer of oils and tinctures and whatnot, or as my child is, I think droppers are really unnecessary. They're really unreliable. They're not consistent on their measurements. So passing that on to a consumer, I would hate to see that happen when it's really not necessary.
So you'd be in favor of what UDAP is proposing, which is to just leave that up to consumer choice
Absolutely,
and the discretion of the processor, whether to include it or not?
absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. Any further board discussion? Okay, well, we will take public comment now on this public comment period for this rule. Do we have anybody with a comment online?
So we have Alyssa Soperman. She just gave a comment about the rules. You can find the rules posted on the public notice website. All these are on public notice website. And then is there anybody else on the Zoom call that wants to make a comment on this?
Okay, it appears we have none online. Is there anyone in the room who'd like to make a comment? Okay, I'll bring it back to the board for potential action.
Jamie, I want to propose that we vote approving these changes. And for the servings in milligrams per serving weight for the cannabis products.
All right, so moved. Do we have a second? Second. All right, so we have a motion to approve the rules. Oh, not there yet, Des.
Yeah,
You have a
sorry.
comment?
No, I just didn't hear what he proposed.
He proposed, he made a motion to approve the draft rule.
Okay,
Item 5, rule that was proposed that we've been discussing.
okay,
regarding
yes.
milligrams per serving. And we have a second. All those in favor of approving the proposed rule R68-28 regarding milligrams per serving. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes unanimously.
I don't know if this is time, but there's also another small change to that rule that we would like to bring forward to the board.
That was,
If you would like to.
yep, I forgot. let's go back. So.
It is two separate things.
Yeah, we're not
And we
gonna
can take-
change it.
And we can take a second motion on it, so if you, Cody, if you want to go ahead.
Yeah.
And discuss an additional substantive change to R 68-28. Go ahead.
Yeah, this is actually one that I think that the board more likely would be okay with and would be willing to put into this next rule change there. But this is a second item that is on the same rule, R 68-28, which is the cannabis processor rule. Again, I appreciate you letting us bring this forward. It's something we've discussed, but it has to do with the cannabis processors needing to get heavy metal testing on the vape cartridges that they bring in. There currently, the rule states that each batch of vaporizer cartridges needs to be sampled for heavy metals by one of our independent cannabis testing laboratories pursuant to our statute for heavy metals. What we are requesting, or actually bringing to the board for your input, is that we would like to have the wording or have a certificate of conformance from the manufacturer. Pretty much meaning that the manufacturers that the producers purchase their vapes for, if they have met those manufacturing practices and have that certificate showing that they're going to be being vaporizer cartridges, that would be good enough for both the processors to prove that safety as well as the department to accept as meeting that safety criteria.
Thanks, Cody. I would say, and I'll let Matt speak to this as well, this will decrease testing costs, right? We will not have to have these vaporizer cartridges, tested as long as we have the appropriate documentation from the producer.
Just a clarification, they already have been tested, so they were tested.
Oh, yes, yes.
Not double tested.
We won't have to double test this. Thank appreciate that clarification, Brandon. So they will have been tested by the producer already themselves, and that certificate will now be good enough in order to be able to provide you all with the assurance that you need that they're not, contaminated with heavy metals. It will decrease testing costs, and obviously any decrease in testing costs creates, ostensibly a decrease in the price of the product. So I think it would be good. We already get these from our producers anyways. The only folks that may have any issue are those who buy from producers that can't produce these, but they would still be required to put them through the testing anyways. It's kind of an either or proposition. So from our perspective, as a company, and I don't think I'm gonna let anyone else speak. We would have no issue. So, what do you think?
No, I mean, it's to save time and being redundant. I mean, it's anything that JD said, I agree with. I mean, that's with this order size that we're putting in for cartridges, our size of point, we may have 2 or 3, sometimes 4 batches from producers, and the supplier that we currently use does test it already. Before every order is sent to me by batch. Here are your batches. Here's the certificate of heavy metals and testing they've done. So it's just a good way to save money. Just those savings towards Utah patients.
But Matt, what was the paragraph or the section that this related to, or this be changed?
So it would be R 68-28-4.
Okay.
With the cannabis processing facility requirements, and then we can go all the way down to the very end of 10 with the added on production. So R 68-28-4. Sentence.
Okay. And yeah. So there would be a phrase that would be added or have a certificate of performance.
They're testing for heavy metals. And a processing facility, or the provider and those records.
Yeah, there's
Yes.
a requirement for our medical cannabis processors to keep that.
So currently, we're keeping both what we get from the cartridge producer themselves, as well as the records of the testing we submit to you all. So now it's just, we need to have one or the other.
Yep.
Okay.
The inspectors do check for those if they got on-site.
All right, any further discussion from the board on this addition to R 68-28? All right, we'll open it up to public comment. Anyone who would like to comment online? Like we have anyone online, anyone in the room who'd like to comment? It looks like we have no one in the room. I'll bring it back to the board for potential action.
Mr. Chairman, I want to make a motion that we approve this addition of allowing to have a certificate of conformance from the manufacturer when it comes to heavy metal testing of vaporizer cartridges.
All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'd second that. Misty Smith.
All right, thanks for the second, Misty. All right, so we have a motion to approve. The producers may use a certificate of conformance for heavy metal testing in vaporizer cartridges. We have a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. All right, that brings us down to item number 6 on the list, which is going to be some rules from the Department of Agriculture and Food. It's like brand.
Could we actually, item 7 ahead of item
Item
6,
7.
because we're gonna be discussing some stuff in item 7.
Yep.
Item 6.
That's fine. So we will discuss item 7 first. We'll move it ahead of item 6. Item 7 is the UDAP limits or bans on unknown and poorly characterized cannabinoid compounds in medical cannabis and cannabinoid products. So to give you a little bit of background on some of this before we have the presentation, during the last legislative session, the lawmakers, as part of the cannabis bill, passed a provision that allows the Department of Health and Human Services to make a recommendation to ban or limit certain substances or any substance in a medical cannabis product. The memo was drafted by the Department of Health and Human Services recently, been shared with stakeholders and has been shared with members of the board, and it makes certain recommendations. The Department of Agriculture and Food, in line with those recommendations, has drafted a rule. That rule was first presented to the board. The actual language of the rule was first presented to the board just yesterday. Not sure if anyone's had a chance to read through the proposed rule, digest it, or whatnot, but with that in mind, I'll turn it over to Trevor and to Brandon Forsyth for their presentation.
Okay. So I'm going to give a little bit of context and then hand it over to Brandon to talk more about options and the rule draft that they have. So as the chair said, DHHS, Department of Health and Human Services, sent a memo to Utah Department of Agriculture and Food back on July 26th after reviewing numerous research articles in the scientific and academic realms. DHHS came to the conclusion that poorly characterized and unknown cannabinoids do present a risk to public health and safety, and we are not alone in this consideration. We know that there's dozens of states that have also taken action to limit these kinds of poorly characterized and unknown cannabinoids. So Abby, would you mind going to the next slide? There we go. So questions to focus on for today are, why should Department of Agriculture and Food place limits on these unknown and poorly characterized cannabinoids? And then what limits should be placed ultimately in the medical cannabis market? So the first question, we can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. It's a little touchy. There we go. So why did DHHS make this recommendation? As I alluded to earlier, DHHS, along with other scientific, medical, and public health communities, are concerned about the health effects of these cannabinoids. In recent years, as products with these poorly characterized and unknown cannabinoids have really come online in markets across the United States, we have seen numerous states, counties, cities have their poison control centers report adverse effects from these products, both in the cannabis market, adult use, medical, and in the hemp market. Both the CDC and FDA, so that's Center for Disease Control and the Food and Drug Administration, have put out advisory warnings to states and public health agencies, as well as consumers, warning them that these products are often untested, are either unregulated or poorly regulated, and that there are real concerns with these products in both the hemp and the cannabis markets. So DHHS reviewed the literature, as I said, and in our memorandum, which is published on the public notice website to Agriculture and Food, we cite 3 very strong research articles in which we believe clearly demonstrate a need to have UDAP limit or ban certain cannabinoids that are of concern here. With that, I think we can go to the next slide, and Brandon, I'm happy to hand it off to you if you want to talk about options.
Yeah. So the options we discussed with the Department of Health and Human Services was to ban outright ban all the known or poorly characterized cannabinoids. Option 2 would be to allow Delta 8, because there are some patients who prefer to be able to use that one, but ban all other poorly characterized cannabinoids. Basically, we're just going to carve out for Delta 8. 3 would be to allow Delta 8 THC if it's or really any other one. I guess 3 and 4 are kind of the same in that we could allow any cannabinoid that a medical provider recommends a patient use, but only in that certain circumstance. I think the producers would see some issues with that one because making a special run of a single product for an individual patient is going to be very cost prohibitive. But we didn't want to take away any options. You guys, and for Delta 8, it's probably not as big a deal to come out with a product that has that if there are a patient on it. So those are the 3 policy options that we discussed with the Department of Health and Human Services. The way we drafted it in the rule would basically be option 1, where we're not allowing Delta 8 even, and the 2%. Because Delta 8 is found naturally in sunflower, so we wanted to set a reasonable limit for it to be there. But if it was being produced synthetically, it would be pretty obvious it would be there in greater quantities. Do we want to have any discussion from the board?
Yeah, I do have a couple of questions. At some point, I do want to ask some questions of the Department of Health and Human Services regarding the memo itself and some of the research to support it. Because some of that research seems to be much more aimed at the hemp market, medical cannabis, and a lot of what I'm aware of, like the country, is much more in relation to hemp. So I'll be happy to be educated on some of that stuff from a health perspective. But my question for you, Brandon, is, and I appreciate you all putting this rule in front of us because I think it gives a little bit better context than the memo and the research that supported that memo. So I see that there are certain cannabinoids that there's absolute 0 tolerance for. Of those cannabinoids, are you currently seeing those in medical cannabis products?
We're not, so let's go directly to that list. So part of the change is to go down to the cannabinoids testing portion. RTA 29-7. Table 3 are the
Just a second. You guys have the ability to pull that up.
Yeah.
We can see it as we're discussing. Let's go back to the presentation. Just want to make sure everyone
March
online.
68.
Yeah.
You exit out. And again, for those participating online, you are able to go to the public notice website and view the rule that we are presenting now. You can view your own version of it.
And I hope everyone will take note. This is very much a draft. We don't get this was a thought and see if we want back on this. Correct. Affected by this. So if we can go down to R68.
Now go to the next table 3.
So table 2 is right there.
There's table.
Table 3 is the list of things that are just being outright banned. The department was very careful about what cannabinoids to include in these, because a lot of cannabinoids have very similar molecular weights. We didn't want to unnecessarily fail anything but just identify every cannabinoid. And so everything in here has a very particular molecular weight and has never been shown to be present that I've seen at least in a natural flower. These are all completely artificial and should not show up. We're not going to be routinely testing for these things, or requiring labs to routinely test for these cannabinoids. But if we see something indicative of there being a large amount of unknown cannabinoid present, we would do special testing for these. And they would need to be identified by mass spec in order to fail at that point. We haven't found any of these cannabinoids in any amount of medical cannabis market, only in the market. So this is really more of a proactive measure are HHC, THC, or activated THC. There is a strain of flower out there that produces some THC, but again, just because a flower produces it is not necessarily like there's all kinds of bioengineering, and it's not been tested at all, really, just shown that it can be present in flowers. So we just want to keep the patient safe and using cannabinoids that are well known.
So essentially, it would be fair to say that the reason that there's kind of a zero tolerance for those cannabinoids is because generally you don't see them naturally occurring in the plant.
Yep.
All right, so then I want to move up to table 2. There are obviously a number of cannabinoids that are listed to have no limit, but then there are several that have, a 1% or a 2% limit. Can you discuss why certain ones are a 2% limit versus a 1% limit, and then really help us to understand where the 1% versus 2% limit is coming? Is that something that is supported by research and data, or is that an arbitrary number based upon, experience? Just let us know where that's kind of coming from.
Yeah, for sure. So first off, the table is all of the cannabinoids that we currently require testing for, as well as CBDC, which is one we're seeing more and more of lately, but more so on the hemp market side. So the two that are 2% are Delta 8 and the CBDC. And we set those a little bit higher because we do occasionally see those in some amounts in flower. And so we wanted to set a reasonable limit where if it's being produced naturally by the plant, we allow for it. But they're often also created synthetically, as we know. And so we want to have some upper cap to make it so that that synthetic THC or synthetic cannabinoid wasn't making it into the product on a routine basis. At least. So if we're taking that small amount, obviously we're not going to catch that. Ones that are at 1% are traditionally not found in the flower naturally and are a byproduct of manufacturing. And we did set the limit somewhat arbitrarily because there's not good data out there for where to set these limits. And so we set them based on what we see possible for producers at this time. We've looked at the data for last year about and haven't seen a whole lot of things that would fail this right up until that point where we actually did have all the Delta 6, 8, and Delta 10 issues in the program. A lot of those ones that failed for that would have, almost all of them would have failed this criteria as well. But now there's currently no products in Utah that would be failing that 1% limit that we had in the last about a year. So we feel that this protects patients by keeping good manufacturing standards. That's primarily why we're setting this limit here, is good manufacturing standards, while also allowing the majority of the material that's being produced in the program to be here, thereby not possible.
Any other comments from the board on this point?
One of the things it says in here is that in 2A, it does not analyze for each of the analysts, which in table 2. Do the lab currently test all those analysts individually? I mean, are there
all of them individually, plus that CBDC, just added that one on there because it's more and more. And so we want to use delayed onset because we'll allow the other lab, our lab, and already do this, but want to allow the other and a third party lab to bring it up to speed and do that in there. It does take the that on the lab part.
Okay. And then what is the QS proposal as far as effective date?
We haven't proposed an effective date. I just want to validate that. Especially regarding the delegate, there are agents who are wanting stuff. Like hear about it before. Yeah.
I don't have any more questions on these numbers. I do know speaking with kind of other processors out there, I think it's they appreciate kind of the lab and making sure that we have the right cannabinoids and everything available. I mean, how often are your standards kind of tested upon to ensure accuracy? Because it's one of the things that could hamper this. I mean, you're off a little bit, but your testing is, over time, you understand how that works, it's gonna get off. How often is that regular?
So we actually buy new standards from Even Scientific every 2 months, just because we go through them that quickly.
I have a couple things, and I'm sorry, I can't really hear the debate very well, so I may be saying something that somebody else has already said. I don't think I'll ever support a ban on Delta 8s, as long as they're processed right, have good COAs, they're tested, and we can say that they're safe, right? As far as the other adulterants, I don't, I sent this out this morning. Obviously, everybody knows that I'm against like the 6A, 10A. I even tried them and I did not think it was a great experience. I think that, the people that I've sent this to look at, my medical director, one of them, and a couple other people, I have not gotten any responses from them. So right now I'm just feeling, as much as on the surface, I have to say, I agree with this. I just want a little bit more time to have people review this and make sure that we're making the right decision, before we just go out and ban something, without being 100% sure that we're doing it in the right way. So if my ask or recommendation is that we maybe look over this for a month and revisit this next month after we can kind of pull a couple more people in and make sure that we're doing this in the right way.
That's very much our intent as well, Des. That's why we brought this forward to you guys without a date on it. We want feedback from patients and from all stakeholders.
Okay, good. I just didn't know, maybe you guys said that and I didn't hear it, but I've just been looking at this thinking, I sure hope we don't have to vote right now, so.
That brings up something additional for me too. Are you aware of any other states across the country that are testing for these cannabinoids, specifically the Delta 6 and the Delta 10 cannabinoids as part of their?
There are some that have it in their extended panel. They're not traditionally part of the main panel of cannabinoids. So if they suspect any kind of contamination, they'll use their extended panel, but not other factors.
Have you discussed with those states why they have put it kind of on the extended panel as opposed to the primary panel?
Not really, no.
Do you guys plan to do that?
I have asked several states about it who don't have them on their current panel, and it's really more a matter of a lot of other states don't have a reference testing laboratory like we do, like the state actually testing things, and so they have to force third-party laboratories to add it to their panels. It ends up taking time and getting political because they don't want to add more stuff to their panels. So
with that in mind, knowing that we're, presumably the only state testing on the primary panel, do you feel confident in the results that you're getting in the testing?
Oh, yeah.
And that it's accurate?
They're just as accurate as any results we're getting for any of the other cannabinoids, because we do get certified reference material from Even Scientific, like everything else. So as confident as you are in any of the other results, obviously there can be issues with certified reference standards. We've seen that before. It's usually off by 1% accuracy, but traditionally you're below 0.1% accuracy on all these things.
So it'd be fair to say you feel as confident in your Delta 9 results as you would in your Delta 6A, 10A results?
Yep.
Okay. We can continue the presentation if there's more of it. If not.
We can go back to the options. We kind of went through 1 and 2, but
we went through 3 and 4 as well.
Yeah, I feel like
if we want to allow it based on a medical provider's recommendation for Delta 8 only or for.
yeah, I'm happy to speak to that a little bit, that, we understand that there's a distinction with Delta 8. Of course, it's kind of become the boogeyman in the hemp market. There's been a lot of articles about Delta 8 products coming up across the nation, but we also understand, as Des was speaking to, some patients do report Delta 8 is less psychoactive for them, and therefore, some people call it diet weed or weed life. So even though that's, an adult use disposition, we know some people do prefer these Delta-8 products. And therefore, the board could consider recommending a carve out for those products. Since there is, even though it's still a poorly characterized cannabinoid, there's more known about it, especially in comparison to on table 3, things like HHC, THCO acetate.
And it's found naturally
Correct.
at a low amount.
Wow. And a lot of the reports, it's hard to disambiguate some of the adulterants that might be found in Delta-8 synthetically produced Delta-8, because it often has some kind of solvents in there or some other chemicals or byproduct of the manufacturing. So there is reason to be careful with Delta-8. We understand that, but we don't want to take it straight off.
Right. But my understanding is that the Delta-8s that have kind of got given Delta-8 the bad rap, we're producing them in a completely different way here, right? Like we're not going to run into adulterants that are, sweeping across the nation and giving Delta-8 the bad name. So we're doing it in a medical way here. So
I think the big difference is we're testing for adulterants on
Right.
this stuff. We don't necessarily ban the way that you produce, although we could get into that at some point if we needed to. But we're testing for those things that we know are harmful and often showing up. Well, at least the ones that we know of. Again, this is still emerging science. They could be adding, some mineral that we're not testing for currently to the process at some point.
Do you know, I know part of the application process for having a processing facility is, one of the questions is, there is CBD to THC conversion. Are there any, ones I know, processing wise, some shit that they don't, are there any in the state that are actively converting CBD to THC?
Well, are you talking medical cannabis?
Yeah, medical cannabis.
Yeah, it's about 50-50, actually. There's a number.
When I was reading through kind of D8 and where it's at, I know it's kind of a mixed topic, right? There's some that are loving this, some that hate it. And it has taken a bad rap as far as there were a lot of producers synthetically, they were creating it, right? And so through those processes, maybe it's been refined. We haven't ever had a need to research and look into those steps. But I know a lot of states have banned it outright.
Right.
Do you know how many states across the United States have actually
At least 12 have banned Delta-8.
and
In
are?
the hemp market and the medical, in general.
Yes, for both markets.
If I could do one clarifying comment though, it's in the operating plan of about half of the producers. That doesn't mean they're actively.
Actually do it, yeah, they just.
Question for you on research, just in general. We have a new research center at the University of Utah. Do you plan to propose research regarding these cannabinoids? Because look, at some point, CBN, right, was thought to probably be poorly characterized, right?
Yeah.
Now it appears in multiple products across the medical cannabis market, right? I'm not saying Delta-6A, 10A, or any of these that we're talking about would ever fall into that, but do you guys plan to propose to have that research center to research this?
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, I'd like to think of this list of cannabinoid components that we have here as an expanding list over time. Like once we have more evidence to suggest that these are safe, I have no problem, or I don't think the department has any problem adding to it. We just want to make sure that we're growing with the science rather than just the availability on the market.
Certainly. And then I guess this is a good time to probably ask questions to DHHS that I have. I noticed in reading the memo and the articles that go along with it, those articles are much more focused on Delta-8 specifically and or hemp-derived products. And it seems some of the concerns around hemp-derived products don't exist in the medical cannabis market, right? In terms of testing, in terms of packaging and labeling, in terms of appealing, whether they're appealing to children and things like that. So help me understand how we go from concerns about Delta-8 in the hemp market to concerns about these cannabinoids specifically, and what other research is potentially out there. Because look, in the world that I come from, a memo supported by 3 research articles that doesn't amount to more than 15 pages seems like there should be more there. And I'm not saying that you don't reach the same conclusion. Is it that there's just a dearth of research? And then really, why why then are we extrapolating the potential ills of Delta 8 in the hemp market to the medical cannabis and putting it on these, adding these additional cannabinoids? So just kind of help me walk through the process of where DHA shifts was coming from, what the research was done, and look, if it's really just a lack of research, I'm happy to hear that as well.
If I can comment,
You can go ahead,
going-
and, I'll-
going back to February of 2022, the Cannabis Research Review Board actually did a systematic review of the literature in regards to Delta H, THC, and some of the other analog synthesized cannabinoids. And we do have a position statement on that board's site. And basically, making a long story short, at that time, we couldn't identify any evidence from the literature of the therapeutic benefit. The very few, if any, studies which were poorly controlled were targeted more at some of the potential health risks. So in that board's position, reviewing the literature, there just wasn't any literature to support any benefit. So at that time, we couldn't support the therapeutic uses of those products. But it really was a dearth in the research literature.
That in relation to Delta 8 or these
Now-
other cannabinoids as well?
What little there was on Delta 8. It was harder to find anything on any of the other analytes.
One thing I'd add is that the effects of Delta 8 and the other poorly characterized cannabinoids are largely unknown. There's not a toxicological harm that is, there's just unknown toxicological harm regarding those. When you compare them to all of the others that are listed in the table that are listed there. So we just don't know enough about these others. We know more about Delta 9, obviously CBD, and the others that are listed there. But at the level that we were finding, we were testing for in Delta 8 THC, it was finding present at higher amounts than it was found naturally. And simply, there is not enough known about how that will affect the human body. And as we find, I'm not a scientist, but there's some I think, substance to the argument that compounds can affect the body very differently that are very similar, right? They're similar, they're analogs, but they can affect you differently. And so if a patient goes in thinking, well, I'm getting this, we want them to be able to count on them having that effect. And right now, there's just not enough we know about, especially the THC analogs that have psychoactive effect. There's not enough we know about the other analogs of Delta 9 THC. So those are some of the thoughts that came about in the memo, and we felt confident that the study supported those thoughts.
Any further discussion from the board or otherwise?
I mean, one question is kind of tying two rules here together. But last year was when they rolled out obviously the D6, D10, kind of came out into the market, the testing began. There was a rule change as far as the labeling products as derived synthetic cannabinoid. Based on what you've done, you've now reclassified these cannabinoids as just being a cannabinoid component, which includes the D6 and D10. And then the artificially derived cannabinoids are the HHC, the THCO, and the THCP. So will that be changing for the rule 2016-28? As far
Yeah,
as
you probably will have to make accessory changes to this.
Okay.
Once this happening.
No, I had that. That's making sure that, I mean, there will get a comment on that too. No, hopefully very. Yeah. Okay.
doesn't look like we have any further discussion. I'll just say, I think similar to what, Des had talked about, having only seen this rule for less than, 24 hours, the proposed rule, I think we would like, at least I personally, would like some additional time to go back and discuss this with, I can call them like constituents, right, the pharmacy folks. I'm sure Matt would like to have additional time to discuss it with processors and cultivators, and then anyone else on the board. If there is any additional research, I definitely love to see it. If there isn't, I understand this is the complexity and the duality of what cannabis is, right? Where it remains federally illegal, it can't be studied, at the federal level. But I would hope that the new research center, these are the types of things, that they can tackle. And if there's a way we can find for them to, use the products that are actually in the medical cannabis market here to do some research and some testing. I know Matt and I both would feel very comfortable, providing those products, for testing. And one of the few good things I did here is that if the research dictates it at some point, you all are willing to, to walk it back. And that's much appreciated, because look, at one point, I think THC might have been the only cannabinoid, right? But even THC, right? I'm not sure there's as much research as you would like to be definitive. So it would be my position that we take a motion to table this to next month's meeting. In the interim, let's see if we can't get some better consensus from our constituents. So I would entertain a motion to table, but those are my thoughts. Any additional thoughts from the board? And actually, before we get to a motion, I do want to open it up to public comment, and then we'll come back to the board for action. So do we have any public comment online? That's asking for a link to the public website. Okay. Doesn't look like we have any public comment. Do we have any comment in the room? Okay. Mindy, you'll have to, I think you have to sign.
Here?
Yep, you have to sign, I think there's a sign-in sheet and everything to make public comment.
Sign it over there. Is that what you guys wanted?
Yeah.
Okay, my name is Phyllis Smale. I'm the executive director of the Cannabis Association. I just had a quick question about options 2 and 3, because I think those are probably the most likely seen. I'm curious what implementation looks like. Would you be sweeping Delta 8 into the medicinal program, or would you continue to allow hemp retailers to develop and sell?
We currently allow small amounts of Delta 8
Right.
in the hemp product.
Right.
It gets added into that 0.2% that's allowed. Those regulations are separate from medical cannabis regulations, so it won't affect those.
Okay. I think that was it. I'll ask. I'm Mindy Mateo, pharmacist. You had mentioned that there was 12 states that outright banned Delta 8 for the campus space on the medical campus space. How many states allow Delta 8 in their medical program? Do you ever look at that? I thought there was still other states, but I could be incorrect.
So we know that if we have those at least 12 since April of 2023 that have outright banned it in both markets. But
From what I understand, it's primarily in the hemp space. It's not in a medical market in most other states. Is that correct?
it's dependent, but based on my research, those states decided to sweep it in the medical market too, given that whether it's hemp or medical, the concern still exists if it's the same cannabinoid that's being targeted. But some states most likely have made those distinctions and banned it in the hemp market, but continue to allow it in the medical market. But I don't have hard statistics for you.
And we'll allow it. I agree with Misty that there's not a lot of research that there's not a lot of Q&Ps, patients. I've never had a patient ask for it. Never had a Q&P ask me for it. As a healthcare provider myself, I've never once wanted to recommend it. And And then my next question has to do with dosage, because I think making a distinction for the dosage forms might be a good compromise. So Delta 8 and an edible, something that you can ingest into your body, is much more safe in my opinion than something you vaporize. Anything you vaporize needs to have a higher burden of safety, because there's more risk of injury. So I would support keeping Delta 8 in topicals and even edibles. But is there a way we can look at looking at different dosage forms?
Be new to the program, like we don't currently limit cannabinoids based on dosage form. Of course, that's something that we could look into doing.
Yeah, from the research I've done, it's the Delta 8 conversion. We're worried about the byproducts that are inhaled through the vape carts especially. So from my opinion, I would never, ever recommend anybody inhale a Delta 8 vape cart, but I would be more okay with a gummy, for example, because your GI tract can really break down those things that are harmful. Your lungs cannot. So, that's all I have.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, I had a quick question involving the converted liters. So in other markets, you're finding a lot of operators are converting the CBD liters to THC, and then that is getting into the supply chain. So you mentioned there's some operators, not all of them are doing active conversions, but is there anything in place that states if they do a conversion, even if the Delta 8 is under a certain amount, that product should be flagged that this was from a synthetic or converted? There is at least that.
Yeah, there is a requirement for it to be converted to at least 95% known cannabinoids, and then to have on the label that it contains the artificially grown cannabinoid.
Okay, awesome, thank you.
Thompson Bob. I'd love the board and various sundries are in favor of Delta 8 for patients, because I would say that I see patients all the time that they do like Delta 8 because it's not hitting the CB1 receptor so high, it's hitting that CB2, good for nauseousness, anxiety. Some of our patients like it better for pain. And I guess my biggest question is on a lot of these lists of different cannabinoids, especially the CBTC. What is the reason why that's?
Because they're being created synthetically primarily. If it's, that was our primary consideration, making that as percentages. I think we're very naturally just a little bit higher, if we're lower. And if it was in the plant, it's kind of naturally in the plant, not like all these whole bars that are being purposely developed to express certain components that ones that are now trying to just take the pill that don't.
Sure. Well, then with that same thing being said on the Delta 10, I have quite a few patients that they express that they like that the same way as the Delta 8. Obviously, if it's, synthetically derived versus naturally occurring, but same thing with the CBTC. What are the perceived risks besides the synthetically derived?
The risk really is that there's not a lot known about these things. Like there's practically no clinical data that I can find about these things. There's a little bit for Delta 8, most of the others, there's almost nothing. And so the benefit to patients we feel is potentially very low. There's just,
Just sort of, no.
yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll close public comment and bring it back for potential action. Made a motion already, correct? Yes. Yeah, I can remake the motion. I motion that we table the discussion or any action on the unknown or poorly characterized cannabinoids until next meeting. Do I have a request for action?
There's not a request back to this time. This was just to get this before the board side and before the public so that we can get comment. I really do want to get public feedback on this because I don't have really strong feelings about banning Delta 8, for example. But if there are strong feelings about people wanting to ban it, if the tape is off
something that might be helpful on future agendas would just be information or action. Just deliberating between the two. Is this an information item, which it sounds like it is, so no action would be necessary. We can discuss that.
So with that in mind, yes, my motion is, my motion would be a motion to table this. Further discussion and or action at our next meeting. Do I have a second?
I don't think you need to make an action, Mr. Chair. It's just a donation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Table. Okay, all right.
Right.
Okay, perfect. Now we will jump back to item number 6, which is a UDAP school presentation. And I will turn it over to Brandon.
Yeah, first, actually, we'll have Amber Brown talk about the non-substantive changes that we're making to our 6829. Not mine. You there, Amber?
An action item?
Yeah, it will. So I can go over this one. We're just proposing some non-substantive rule changes. There's a misspelling of the word tetrahydro. Right. Yeah, that includes item 18. In the definition of self-made PhD, basically, it's just no instead of a, this is just a misprint by the office. And then similarly, down to the table, the microbial contaminants on table 2, that same rule, it's supposed to be CFU per gram or milliliter, and it was originally put as CFU. The lab's already been carrying that part out that way, cleaning away. That page is done, so it's not going to affect anything in the program. That's it.
Yeah. Not the CFU language, but the word for tetrahydrocanol is spelled correctly. It says 16, and then there's 216. I see it on the spot.
No, it's not.
Very small.
It does say that in the summary of the rule change.
Yes.
It's the wrong number there. We'll get that corrected.
All right, any discussion by the board?
So it's just those 2 points?
Yep.
Microbial and non-substantive changes?
Yep. All right, with no more public or no more board discussion, we'll open it up for public comment. Is there anybody online? Doesn't look like we have anyone online. Anybody in the room that would like to speak to these blockbuster changes? Okay, I'll close public comment. We'll bring it back to the board for potential action this time.
I'll make a motion, Mr. Chair, to approve the UDAP rules as presented.
We have a second.
I'll second the motion.
All right. So we have a motion to approve the following changes to R 68-29. They're going to correct the spelling of tetrahydrocannabinol, portion of the rule, and they're also going to add in table 2 the unit of measurement no longer to be CFU. It will be changed to reflect CFU per gram or CFU per milliliter. That motion has been seconded. All in favor of that motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. All right, that brings us to next item on the agenda. Really doesn't bring us to the next item now. We move into what I believe is discussion at this point and nothing for action. So I'll turn it back over to Amber and to Dr. Forsythe for some additional presentation.
This one will actually be Cody.
Oh, good. All right.
He's got everything to say.
Keeping us on our toes.
Yeah, thank you. So really, this is just an item to bring to the board to see, really to maybe pass on to, as JD mentioned, to constituents to see if this is something for the board to discuss and maybe possibly talk about rules there. We're talking about cannabis radiation. So in kind of the thought of being transparent to the patients overall, you know, we've heard that there are some patients that are concerned over the use of radiation to help medical cannabis, mostly flower, pass tests for microbials. You know, the bigger issue might be sanitation in those aspects, but it's something that is used throughout the industry, throughout the world, really, and actually is used on many different products. It's approved by FDA, it's used on a number of products that includes beef and pork, as well as vegetables and fruits as well. But again, based on some of the discussions and some of the things that we've heard, wondering if the board has any appetite on looking into rules for that, or at least talking to constituents, see if there maybe want to be movement towards notifying patients that this has happened to the product. In the future, my thought would be something similar to the artificially derived cannabinoids notification that is supposed to be on labeling as well. This is something that they might do or would want to make happen. Yes. We're coming to the board to ask if you guys would like us to come up with a rule, or if you'd like to discuss further with your constituents and give some direction on something, or if it's something that maybe you're not that concerned.
There are some processors proposing to use this in the state of the future.
Radiation of flower. Currently, are there any producers using these techniques?
There's some UV lights being used in some aspects, I think, but not anything that they're starting to bring in or wanting to bring in something equivalent to radiation. That's what their operating procedures and how they handle that, which also might be negotiated.
Real quick, do you know, I mean, again, I'm familiar with the technology and the processes they're looking at. Has there been any research into flour that's not irradiated versus flour that is, what effect or changes that would have? I mean,
Definitely affects the microbial load.
well, yes, it cleans it up, but is there any
intended?
You know, similar to all the other peppers we've been talking about, cannabinoids, there depends on what you do. Who put out there, right? It's trying to determine what is the truth and what you think is fiction as you're doing this research. I mean, there's talk about it, maybe possibly making some changes to the DNA, both the plant and microbials, which also might just make it so that the DNA in the microbe allows it to reestablish itself later on. Like I said, it is all over the place. Nothing that I'm willing at this point to stand on and say that it's true or not. However, you know, probably the overall thing that I took from it is that it is an acceptable thing for FDA, right? For a lot of different things. And so we're all consuming products that have gone through this in one form or another most likely. But there is concerns, right? And rightly so. And again, making sure that safely and correctly, and then getting that out there to the patients if that's something that is something to be for the transparency level.
And again, I think I appreciate that, Cody. I think one of the concerns that I foresee is, I mean, there's a difference between irradiated food or whatever, or items, but is it ingested? I mean, when this is vaporized right in the lungs, is there a difference as far as the intake and the patient's been affected by? Again, I mean, it's far out as far as whether or not this is going to be happening. I think it's definitely something for consideration for look at it and review. Just there definitely need more information provided to make an informed decision.
Yeah, and it could go down to the route of that it's something that we do not want in the industry. you know, for that type of thing. Like I said, there's probably a lot of, what is, what?
So we don't have a mic right
Oh,
now.
that's weird.
You can like-
What, that Cody?
I don't whisper, you can ask the family. A lot of talk song. So, yeah, it comes down to, obviously, the FDA has about it, several things, but as you point out, after, it's not necessarily being vaporized, but it belongs, or, I'm not sure, I saw anything, doing the research on that. Yeah. Again, there's even less research on how this affects cannabis, right? It's all over the place, you can find a lot of things through FDA, it's talking about those food items I mentioned, but.
People are also like heating and busting flour in order to get into their lungs as well, and I would say that poses a much greater risk.
Would you guys be willing to share the little bit of research you have? So we can just kind of learn about this.
Yeah, so we're happy to share anything we have, but also we're not going to come up with a substantially different opinion on this. We don't see this as the immediate direct harm to patients, but we want to be sensitive to patients' concerns if they do have one. If there is a perceived risk, patients want to be aware, we want to also provide them with that information. So I don't think we're going to find a whole lot of research that varies from that, but generally in regards to this thing.
Sure, I think just to be able to see that, right? Read through.
Our hope would kind of be to also gather the help of the constituents on thought prices that might be responsible.
Yeah, certainly, if nobody cares if we only want something that's abbreviated. Yeah. Yeah. But if you stick it right on. Yeah, that'll be fine.
Yeah, that's.
Okay, well, I don't think we need necessarily any action on that. I think the only directive would be just to provide that research to the board. And then we can discuss it at the next meeting.
Yep. Then the last one is back in that copy of our 6829. We were referencing earlier for the exam things. We've made a small change to the foreign matter standards. It's been pointed out to the department on a few different occasions that we don't have a specific number of seeds that would require the product to fail. And so there was some discretion for the laboratories, and producers actually came forward wanting an official number on this. It's worth noting that this is one of the areas where we get a number of complaints from patients about finding seeds in their flour. This is a direct concern to patients. We've identified 3 areas in which we have concern with flour. The biggest one for us is potential for a patient to get seed from the flour and start growing their own. That's not allowed in the state, so we don't want to see the medical cannabis program providing the means to grow flour in patients' homes or start black market operation either. The second one is that it's just taking away from the net weight in the product that is usable as medication to the patient, so it's lowering the value to patients. And the third is that if this stuff is ground, if the seeds are actually ground, seeds tend to have other compounds in them, particular oils that can kind of be acrid in their smoke or vapors that are inhaled by the patient, so it can contribute to either coughing that you experience when vaporizing flour, and potentially other hazards from that acrid smoke. So our proposed limit for the number of seeds in flour is slightly complicated. Traditionally, these flour is sold in minimum amount in 3.5 gram packages. So we propose basically an average of 1 seed per 3.5 gram package would be acceptable. Anything over that would be not acceptable. So if you read it, we specifically say the total weight of the sample collected or tested by the laboratory divided by 3.5. And so if they're required to have 4 packages taken for that particular production amount, then they can have an average of 1 seed per package before it would be banned.
question for you, because we've seen, in the market that there will be products, flower products that pass UWAL's testing. A patient will then complain about seeds, and then a recall will potentially be issued. Is this going to be, if it passes your testing, then it's not potentially subject to that seed recall? Or if a patient, but you don't catch it, right, but a patient catches it, how will that be handled? The same way it's handled today, or will it be such that it passes your testing and then it's good to go regardless of patient complaints? How will that be handled?
So we would handle that as would any other extremely variable test, right? So seed can be very inconsistent between products. And so if it has that first round of testing, we would do follow-up testing to see if it is a bigger problem. So we might go out into the market, so we would go out into the marketplace and collect seed, not just from the patient, because that can give you a bias sample, obviously, where it's been tampered with, the patient could add seed to it. So we would go out and collect product from multiple different locations in the marketplace and then test that. If it does fail that standard, then we would issue a failure.
So even if it passes initial testing by UWAL, it's allowed to go into the market. If you get a complaint, you'll go and investigate it, do retesting, and then recall that off from the market.
Potentially, yes.
Yeah, our procedures are first, from the regulatory standpoint, is to gather the COAs based on the complaint. We're looking for the batch and see what it says there. And then, as Brandon mentioned, we'll go to the pharmacy or a couple of pharmacies and take a sample at random to see, and then we'll have some in the lab to be tested. And again, if it's an overwhelming failure, there's a good chance it's recall.
And that's not unique to foreign matter. That could be with anything else. If we got a patient complaint and somehow a lab is adulterant in there, we would do the same thing for those.
And then are you identifying seeds just by visual inspection, just so everyone understands?
Yeah.
We understand as producers, just so the whole board can understand, the public. How are you currently going about identifying seed in flower?
It's visual inspection.
Visual inspection.
Yeah.
Are you breaking it apart?
Yes.
All of those things. Okay.
Yep. Full lab.
Okay, well, I don't think we have any action to take on this at this point. I think definitely something to consider and talk to our constituents, come back next meeting and discuss potential proposal. Okay, I think that takes us down to number 8, which is going to be more of a conversation amongst the board regarding kind of prioritizing policy topics for the board to consider. We did put a list out that you all can take a look at, which is item number 8 for everyone. I don't necessarily, unless other folks want to, I don't necessarily want to take a lot of time discussing the topics that are listed in the materials. We definitely can. Obviously, I think we're going to have to prioritize some of these ahead of others, just because the legislature has asked us to look at these things, or regulators have asked us to look at these things. But I also would really like to hear from the board, and especially, more than just Matt and myself, regarding some topics that we'd like to look at, independently. As much as we are here to advise, lawmakers and regulators, on the things they put in front of us, I'd also like to discuss, agenda items that we may be interested in having, the board take a look at, as well as, we could potentially, if we have time, take, public comment, as well.
So I just wanted to say real quick that I've created a crude spreadsheet, admittedly, but as we talk through these ideas, if there's anything we want to add and prioritize, we want to hear this. So I think it's important context that anything you want to bring as a board to the relevant interim committee in November. We have 2 meetings scheduled based on our, 3rd Tuesday of every month. We have a meeting scheduled for September 19th, October 17th, and November 21st. The last meeting of the relevant interim committees, which you can make recommendations to as a board, is November 15th. So right now we have 2 meetings to be able to make any kinds of recommendations you would like, unless you want to schedule a special meeting the first week of November to hash out maybe a couple more policy items and make those recommendations. So I'm happy to change this any way you like, but on the left column, we have just simple prioritization, high, medium, low, how much of a priority is it for the board? And then towards the right, I can put that on the agenda, or you can choose when you want to hear that. And then we can see if it's going to be a statute or rule change. Obviously, any statute change is going to have to go to the legislature, the appropriate committee in November.
Certainly. Yeah, I mean, I think first I'd like to just hear generally from the board, any additional, topics they would like to see us discuss. And then I think we can bring it back and discuss, priority. But really just trying to get an idea from you all, some things you'd like to see us look at that might not be on this list, right? Because what you have here is largely what's been put in front of us by the governance working group, right? For the most part.
So to clarify on that, every topic that ends with an asterisk is something that the medical cannabis governance structure working group has asked specifically to hear from this board.
You'll want to add 1 to 5 because they just discussed that at their last.
They did.
Yeah, their last meeting. So honestly, in full transparency as well, some of these issues are things that have also been put forth by Utah Cannabis Association, right? The Utah Cannabis Co-op. And so there are things that are being worked on actively between the associations, the industry groups, patient groups, and the legislature. So they're not just directed necessarily from the legislature, but they are things that are currently being worked on. And so look, some of these we definitely need to provide input on, prior to the session and probably prior to interim. So we would want to probably deal with most of these, certainly the asterisks, by, no later than our October meeting. Certainly, and probably some of them in September, to the extent that the governance working group is going to discuss any of these again at their meeting in October, depending on when that will necessarily be. So I think with all of that in mind, I just really would like to open it up, not me talk nearly as much and let you all talk, and bring forth any additional topics you have. And if we don't have additional topics, we can at least rank these. And I would like this to just be a running dialogue as we go along, right? This isn't the one time we can put topics forth, right? I want you to feel comfortable in between meetings. We will have our kind of debrief sessions, in between the meetings. So as you feel, strongly about adding something, we certainly can. Because as I've said before, yes, I want to be able to advise on the issues put in front of us by legislators and lawmakers, but I also want us to feel, very comfortable as an independent advisory board to bring forth things that we think are important from a patient perspective, or from industry, or from as a member of the public. Misty, you as a researcher, if there's things you want us to look at, Des, you from a patient, advocate, perspective, and our other members, Jimmy and law enforcement and some of the other folks. So I'd really just like to open it up. And if there's nothing more, we certainly could just spend some time prioritizing these. But with that, I'll just open the floor to any ideas we have.
So I have a couple things that are on Utah Patients Coalition's list to look at during interim, and maybe let's just discuss if we want to throw those on there. But we always have been looking to add any additional forms that are necessary. Everybody knows I want to add suppositories. So, maybe looking at that. I know there's no science to back it up, but we do have patients that specifically go out of state just to get suppositories or are making them at home. And I just don't see any reason why we can't just produce them if somebody wants to produce them. Also looking at raising amounts in specific situations where if somebody has reached their allotment of THC, but for some reason they need more, having their doctor be able to address that and I don't know if we change it to the cub or how we address that, but just be able to allow an extension so we don't have that patient now using the medical market until they reach their limit and then having to turn to the black market to get the rest of their product that month. And then also I just want to take a look at allowing advertising for processors. Right now, patients don't know where that product is going because just advertising is hard, so they end up shopping around. Just some type of ability for processors to be able to say where they took their products, the patients would just make that a little easier. And honestly, I'd like to look at advertising as a whole. I just feel like there's a lot of stress and inability for patients to understand where to go and where products are. And we have QMPs that are able to advertise, but there's still patients that don't even know there's a medical cannabis program. I think we just need to look at untangling that knot of advertising and realizing that a lot of that was started with the intent of making sure that we didn't advertise to kids. I think we can all agree that nobody here is trying to do that. And so if we could loosen that a little bit and allow them to advertise in a medical way, completely different than these QMPs with, cartoons or whatever. Just looking at how we can do that safely and effectively without, enticing children, but actually advertising to medical cannabis patients.
She mentioned, which was increasing
Thanks for writing that
THC limits in certain circumstances.
I know one topic kind of piggyback off that is end of life care. There are a lot of users who are going through their entire allotment within a few days. So that's something, whether it is the compassionate use board or if it's up to the pharmacist charge or wherever, definitely a topic that we should address.
That's connected to the raising of amounts in certain situations.
Is that on here?
That's what we just added.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
we
that's
consider that.
great. That's,
Yeah.
Like an endowment issue. Yeah.
I mean, it's there.
That's a use case for it.
Yeah.
I think too that, that I can speak to from a pharmacy perspective. One is, currently, we require that if you change QMPs, that your first visit with your new QMP needs to be an in-person visit. I think where a lot of patients now, you do see them changing QMPs, I think would be advisable to allow telehealth visits, even if you're switching, QMPs for renewals. Now, with the caveat that QMP would have to have a physical presence in the state of Utah, as well as they also offer initial recommendations, right? Because it guards against, I believe that one of the reasons was the doc in the box, right? That's why we require that in-person visit with, a changing QMP. But I think if you provide those additional guardrails of having a physical presence in the state, as well as they issue recommendations initially to patients, you don't just do renewals. I do think there are some patients that when they realize, well, now I have to go to the actual clinic to renew, I think it's just one additional step that is potentially driving patients away from the program. And something that's similar to that, and this might just be something Rich to fix with you all, kind of from a logistical standpoint, is as it stands right now, a new patient who is issued a card essentially becomes purchase eligible, or has potential to purchase right away, right? They're kind of a conditional patient. Renewing patients don't have that, right? So I almost would think it would be reversed, right? That a new patient, you might want to wait 24 hours to get, let them start shopping. But a renewing patient who's already received a recommendation, right, and is just renewing their card. And I've talked to Amanda about this. I think she was saying it's something to do with an algorithm or something to do with kind of how often you set, the checks to renew cards. I would like to see renewing patients have the same ability to purchase right away after they renew. Because I don't ever go see my primary care and then have to wait 24 hours until I can go to Walgreens, right? Certainly not after I've been seeing that primary care doc for, quite some time, right? I've already seen. So I don't know if that's statutory, I don't know if that's a rule, and it might just be something that's logistical with you all. It sounded more logistical when we talked with Amanda. So
Yeah, I can just make a internal note to get back to you and then to also share this information with the board. So they know how that's addressed, but. On that item 4, I just have a question about that. Is that
related to also, I think I've heard of this concept of the pharmacist being authorized by the QMP to assist with the renewal. Opposed to, is that,
I don't think that's what that is. I know that's been proposed. I know.
that's not the same thing.
I don't think so. I mean, we can add that to our list, honestly, because I know it's something that's been
Yeah,
discussed, the ability of maybe the PMP through either collaborative practice agreement
yeah, that's what,
or otherwise to be
That's
able
separate.
to do the renewal. So collaborative practice agreement, I think, is a little bit separate. This is just much more when you're switching QMPs and it's a renewal that you can go telehealth.
Right.
As long as we have certain guardrails.
But I do think we should add that because you're right, Rich. We have talked about that, just allowing second visit or any renewals, maybe go through the pharmacist. So maybe add that as well. That is probably a huge topic that if it doesn't get passed this year, we'd probably still continue to talk about it for a couple of years to come. So
we call that the collaborative practice agreement.
Yeah.
Between QMP and PMP.
The thought I'm having is kind of a topic that, and talk about QMPs. I know this last legislative session, they ruled the change as far as the 12-month renewal period. Is there data on actually how many patients are now at 12 months? Because I know most QMPs still have the ability to limit it to lower than that. And so it should be interesting to see, are the patients actually getting the benefit of that statute change that would affect?
Yeah, I think the full benefit of it will be seen 6 months after it went live, right?
Yeah, April, so.
Because everybody would have had an opportunity to renew and yeah. But we can provide those numbers at the next meeting.
Certainly, I mean, it's something we've definitely been tracking,
Sure.
closely. It was, the 6 month and the increased cap were definitely something that we push, heavily. So we're obviously tracking, so people are so interested to see
Yeah.
if it does make a difference. A couple of others that we kind of had, one, there's been some discussion around potentially capping the number of independent processors. Now, certainly I'll say this, if they do expand cannabis home delivery to allow processors to deliver, which as an association, we're on record as being quite vehemently against. We don't have to hash that all out today. We will at some point when we get to that issue. But I think if that is going to happen, it's an absolute no-brainer that we need to cap independent processors. Otherwise, you're going to see a potential flood of independent processors into the market, essentially operating closed door, pharmacies and for other potential reasons too. And it might not be a bad idea to have some of those independent processors come in front of us and explain kind of where they're coming from in that regard. So there's that one. One that I personally, this is more of a restorative justice type of initiative. So I don't know when it was, I don't know whether, I think maybe it was 2 sessions ago, the felony requirements for pharmacy agents were amended to say that a felony that was, less than 10 years old was disqualifying. That same language hasn't been put forth for other agents, processing agents, cultivation agents, courier agents, owners, anything like that. And I think if it was good enough for pharmacy agents, it should be good enough for everyone. I would hate to think that a felony from 20 years ago, that is not still impacting someone today, other than hampering their ability to get into the market, would still be impacting them. I can speak, honestly and say we had a security guard, right, that had a felony, right, and it kept him from getting his pharmacy agent card for quite some time. So every day when he would come to work, right, he'd have to sign in as a visitor, be escorted by another security guard or an agent. And this guy is as good as it gets. I would trust my life to this man, right? And to know that he was prevented from that, was difficult. So I'd love to see that amended across the board. Annual rule implementation by the department. I know that rules fly fast and furious. We've discussed as a Utah Cannabis Association the idea of implementing rules once a year and then having appropriate sunsetting provisions, tied to that. Look, obviously there could be multiple flavors of how you do that. Maybe it's not once a year, whatever it is. It's just, and Matt can speak to this as well. Okay, packaging as an example, right? I mean, changed multiple times within 1 year. You have some processors that are sitting on thousands and thousands of dollars, worth of that, just some more predictability to it. Okay, we know October is the month that this happens every year, we can gear up for it, and then we can have enough time in between little implementations to work through things, and some things like that. So that's one, and then my last one is, right now, for publicly traded companies, they have a 10% kind of ownership reporting requirement. That doesn't apply to privately held companies. And privately held companies still have, can have, a lot of times, many owners, right? Not always, right? Usually you think privately held 3 to 5, whatever. Public held companies a lot more. We'd like to see that be brought into, conformance with one another. 10% is good enough for public companies. We think it should be good enough for private. But yeah, those are some of the other ones that we have. But yeah, happy to listen to any others, and then I'd love to hear from the public if they have any. We have quite a list.
Only 18 items so far then.
Yeah.
One after.
Already knocked one off.
Yeah. So any more discussion from the board, Des, from you, or Misty from you online, or even Nanette here?
No, I liked your additions though.
Okay, fantastic.
I agree.
Good. Happy board means happy chair.
Is there, yeah, I don't know if it's a role for us or not, but we had a conversation about research earlier. Is this something the board could make recommendation on further research?
Could you repeat that question? I'm sorry.
Oh, could this board make recommendations on state research into whatever regarding cannabis?
Yes, and I can expand a little bit on and just update the board on where we're at with that just briefly right now. So what we have is $650,000 has been appropriated during this fiscal year, which ends on June 30th of 2024, to support the University of Utah Center for Cannabis Research in piloting, launching their research center. And so what it is just establishing the infrastructure necessary to set up a research center and to identify next steps. And that center is required to report once a year. And the Center for Medical Cannabis is to include that report in our report to lawmakers, right? And so that initial funding will help get things launched. And there's a couple of different directions things could go in the next fiscal year and what we call FY25, right? But no matter what, the board would be welcome to make a recommendation regarding, do you feel like there is an amount of funding that you would recommend be appropriated, whether that's the same, like 650,000 for next year from revenues collected by the Center for Medical Cannabis, or you could recommend a higher amount than that. You could suggest a topic that they focus on at the Center for Medical Cannabis, like was discussed just briefly earlier. Knowing that in the end, it is just a recommendation, and that Center for Cannabis Research sets their own priorities. But the legislature keeps those in check and has the ability to carry the purse. And they're the ones that would mandate that at the Center for Medical Cannabis here at DHHS that we appropriate a certain amount of our revenues.
Certainly, but they also have the ability to get, to the extent it's even available, other funding, right?
Right. The purpose of our funding is essentially to help them get other funding.
Gotcha. Oh, yeah, you guys essentially help them, and that can be either private or public funding, right?
Sure.
Okay. Yeah. That's good.
Right. But everybody knows that scientific research is expensive, especially if you're doing something like a quasi trial where you're getting products from a certain cultivator and processor at a certain facility. And also, it is difficult for those facilities to get licensed federally, because in order to possess under federal law, you must get licensed. And there are companies that have their niche is to help produce or to mimic some products in some states. And to go into that state, they already have the federal license and they just set up shop in that state and mimic whatever is requested for the particular research project that's going on. So there's those type of companies that make it a little quicker to happen. And I've been learning a little bit more about one particular company that does that type of work, just because of their word interest in researchers in Utah expediting and not having to wait for a particular processor or retail location to get licensed by the feds. They could step in under the right contract, provide that at a fee. But anyway, so Kent, that just gives you a little bit of more background.
I think that's helpful. I mean, it seems to me then as a board, we should be at least making recommendation center for this research. I sense an opportunity for collaboration as well, particularly if they've got a list of interests. I could see us doing a prioritization very similar, if that would be more helpful to them. But yeah, certainly there seems like an opportunity there.
All right, I do want to give anyone here in the room or online the ability to bring forth any topics they would like. If we have anyone online who would like to make any comments about topics that they would like to look into. So I would like to save at least a few minutes to prioritize maybe 2 or 3 of these for the next meeting.
Item 8, so yeah, can we approve?
I think Marty, Marianne.
Marianne, can you ask her to unmute?
Hello, everyone. Thank you for taking my question. So I've been a medical cannabis patient since 2020, but right now I'm working out in the cannabis field and I get to talk with patients all the time, QMPs all the time. And the number one request I hear across the board is just the cost of medication is extreme. And I know we just saw Curaleaf by several other locations of pharmacies who couldn't make it. And we're all frankly afraid to see more of that. And I think that there's multiple ways that we could, relieve tax burdens on the pharmacies so that they could pass along those savings, or even just expanding the amount of licenses of people who can grow would help. But that's the number one cause I hear of people leaving the program, or if people reluctant to join the program, because black market is just so much cheaper. They can't afford to be in the medical cannabis program. And I think it's definitely something that needs to be addressed.
Isn't that on our list, the decoupling or the 280E? I guess I'm not seeing it on this one, but I know that was in a plan. Yeah.
It's further under expanded.
Back to the top. It's number 3.
Thank you, Marianne.
Yeah.
Of course. Thank you.
Do we have anybody else online?
Why is number 19?
Yeah, I think kind of what Mary brought up, we said we're already addressing those kind of broader topics that does address pricing, pharmacy control, things like that. As we go into prioritization, I think those are items that we'll be addressing fairly quickly. So,
Anyone in the room like to add any additional topics?
Do we have any data on price increases when the program started?
It's actually okay.
It's gone down. Yeah. Right. Look at
Despite the cost of everything else going on.
Yeah, I mean, for the public to see that, that would be nice. How high is the
monthly data
really
releases.
good to know that?
It's not in our it requires manual work to be able to do that analysis, but that is something that we could check with our data analyst about. If
Average price per category.
right, and it gets complicated because what do you want? Like a snapshot of a certain day during the month? As things change, there's tons of discounts going on like crazy on
I mean, I think
today.
it would be your AOP, right? You know what I mean? You guys, that number is usually easy to provide, you know, or
Right.
extrapolate, you know, what's the average order value, you know, with the market. And I can say, you know, we've seen it come down, you know, quite a bit. I think any producer that's here to talk from a wholesale and a retail perspective, that most product categories have come down quite a bit. Flour, I think, has held somewhat consistently. Would you agree, Bijan?
I think it's gone down.
It's not down, but maybe not as much as your other categories, but
But everything has seen a decrease. I'm not aware that generally, now look, some producers may, some decide to raise prices again, but generally the prices have come down. And I can honestly just say, there probably won't ever be a time that the price of legal cannabis matches that of the illicit market. They do not have the same overhead. They do not pay the same taxes. They do not go through the same processes that we go through. And so, and look, I also think there may be a period of time before Utah's prices maybe match those of some surrounding states. But I think by the time you factor in the travel time, the gas, and a lot of those things, you're sitting pretty comfortable. They did do a study, I remember during, was it last session or some point, they did provide kind of a cost comparison, and Utah was kind of middle of the road. I read something recently that said an adult use market in Illinois now has some of the highest prices in the entire country. So it's not always medical versus, you know, adult use. It's not always small market versus big market. Markets are in different levels of maturity. There's different amounts of licensees and different things. So there's a lot that goes into that. But I think in terms of just the raw data, they certainly should be able to show that. And I think that goes in, you know, generally, it would be nice to see, especially from UDAP's perspective, maybe some more data coming from you all on how much is being produced and some of those things as well, because hopefully that will be able to show patients that there is an adequate production in the market. You know what I mean? Despite how some people might feel. So I think more data is always better, but making sure that we have those right data points, because I do think some of them speak volumes and answer a lot of these questions that we don't necessarily need to debate or put in rule and put in statute. So anyone else in the room have anything else they'd like to add?
Just to carry it up.
Yeah.
Just to carry on your point. I have not to add to that, but just like the point, JD, there's also a public safety concern. So we've independently taken a product from the streets or the illicit market, and then had them independently tested, found that there's a lot of myclobutanol, abamectin, so pesticides, mycotoxins, microbials in vape carts, as well as flour. So as an operator, we're putting together kind of an educational one-pager saying, know what you're buying. So I do think, to echo that point, education from either the regulatory perspective or the operator's perspective to help, because I believe it was Marissa, those concerns are valid. You can buy a vape cart for $20 right now. If you put that through an APRC test, it would pop for countless items that would not pass in the medical program. So I think we're not looking at apples to apples per se. To JD's point, the reason why the costs are a little higher is because we have taxes, we have employees, we have state testing fees. So not in addition, just wanted to echo.
I almost wonder if we add in the outreach and advertising comes on. It certainly seems a very relevant piece of why having a reviewed product versus an illicit product be beneficial to the user.
Certainly, and I think that's where a place where we could collaborate on public education, I think would be awesome. You know what I mean? I think you all would have some, you know, good input there, and I think we as operators would, you know, as well. Look, if it were up to me, it would be as legal as tomatoes. We could give it away for free, right? That's just not the construct, right, that we have, right? But there is a reason that the cannabis in the regulated market costs what it does. And I can tell you, at least from our perspective, it's not meant to gouge the patients. It's not meant to, compromise you financially or anything. It's just, there's a whole lot that goes into producing a gram of cannabis. And I think there's some education that could go, along with that.
And just one other thing to keep in mind, sometimes I think we forget this, but I feel that one of the biggest factor on price is the federal law. And that if it were to change, we'd be able to cross state lines, and there would be a dramatic difference in the price. That's just, I think, that goes without saying. So I know it's been, an effort for years and years for there to be some amendments to the federal law, but that would make a big difference. And if that were to change, any change actually, we can help address it.
Anything? Anything? All right, anything more in the room?
Yeah, go. Make sure you appropriate. Yes. Nicholas Thompson, I'm from Empathetics, one of the biggest medical cannabis clinics in the state, where we help patients. It's kind of a fee thing, but it's also an availability for patients. I would like to see the caregiver cards be an easier process for patients, because most patients, especially our older patients or patients who are end of life care or indigent patients, they need a caregiver or they need help with a care facility. And how that process goes about is not super clear, or it's really hard for patients to be able to get that done. And especially for some of our lower income patients, it doesn't seem like a big amount of money, but then the person having to pay a fee for a caregiver card, for some people, that is a barrier to entry. And so I would like to see something done there to make it easier for those patients, their caregiver, to be able to, just like if they're going to Walgreens, go help, their spouse or, mom or dad or whoever they're taking care of, have them have an easier process to go pick up that patient's medicine or accept the delivery to the home or, things of that nature, just to take care of those patients.
Yep.
You want to add that, JD?
Yes.
One thing to add, Rich, I know you and I have talked about this in the past, but it's provider education. I know that the Department of Health has been required by statute, I think, to have a contract employee to educate providers. But as I've looked at the program as a whole, it feels like that is one of the cogs that's just not turning quite the way it could to allow the program to be as successful as it could be. So just like an overview of what provider education looks like, maybe an update on where the Department of Health is with that.
Yeah.
And ways that we can expand that education to them as well to kind of put this more into this one.
Yeah, and the education in general, I think we can all agree on. Try to tackle. So I would like to, if we can, scroll back up kind of the top of the list. And let's just see if we can at least prioritize maybe 2, at the most 3, I think, to discuss at the next meeting, knowing that obviously you'd ask likely to come back in front of us with 1 or 2 rules next time. Look, the ones with the asterisks, I think we would do well to discuss those sooner rather than later, so we can provide actual impactful comments to lawmakers, because they are likely to move ahead on some front with these. So with that said, I don't know if we just want to take the first 3, or if anyone has a real strong feeling about wanting to push anything up, near the top of the list. I don't necessarily. I feel like we should probably tackle, 1 through 6, which look like the ones with asterisks, before our, by the end of our October meeting, and then be prepared to push maybe at that point, then come back and kind of reprioritize 7 through 20, whatever, 21 or 22. But those are my thoughts. Not gonna hold tight to any of those, but if anyone has anything else, willing to hear it. If not, maybe we just set 1, 2, and 3 for next meeting, and 4, 5, and 6 for October. I like the approach.
I like that.
I do know that the cannabis governance working group, and the number 5, cannabis pharmacy ownership, they did ask us in that meeting to review. They came up with a number they were just pulling out, which I believe was around 30 and 35%. So, which would, if that was the case, eventually you would see 5 companies own all of the distribution, or 3 companies own all the distribution in the state. under that rule, that was the number that was, they came to.
Yep, and because number 4 is a rule, isn't that essentially what we're discussing today? Yep, so that one, we probably don't need to, we'll deal with that at the next meeting, right, as part of the rule itself. So I guess we could do 5 through 7 for October. My question is.
Number 7 is also.
Yeah, number 7 is a rule, not a statute.
Correct.
Depending on the statute.
Well, yeah,
Could be.
we probably need to split that.
Yeah.
Is have additional cultivators have processing license.
Yeah.
But UW does have the authority to operate more cultivators and.
Certainly, yeah, as part of the studies that they've done.
We would just be providing recommendations to the statute to.
Yes.
Processors that we should talk about.
Yeah.
You want to split that issue?
Yeah, go ahead. So yeah, I think we'll do 1, 2, 3 at the next meeting, and then 5, 6, and 7 at our October meeting. And then at the October meeting, I'd like to save some time towards the end, maybe 15 to 20 minutes to prioritize kind of the next handful or so of issues for, the November meeting. Keep in mind, obviously, anything that's going to be statutory, we'll probably want to prioritize that necessarily ahead of the rule, just because the session will start in January. And if we don't have things in front of lawmakers decently early before the session, chances of getting it passed through during the session get tougher and tougher and tougher. The 280E tax credit is a great example of that. Jean and some others did some really good work on that. And I believe had we had more time, we could have gotten across the finish line. But hopefully we'll get something better this session, because there's been a lot more, running. So I would just generally keep in mind rule changes. We don't necessarily have to deprioritize those to statutory changes, but just keep in mind where we are in the time of year. Statutory changes are probably going to need higher priority, just because we need to get those in front of lawmakers, get them in front of the drafting attorney, and on and on and on, and you're a lobbyist, all that fun stuff to get it through. So I think that makes good sense. So yeah, please come prepared next time to discuss the medical cannabis delivery expansion, specifically the concept of processor delivery, because that's what's been thrown around to this point. The medical cannabis program fees, the way that's been discussed to this point, is more around licensing fees, but fees, as Rich has pointed out previously, can include fines and any sort of fee associated with the program. That might include caregiver fees, right? Patient card fees, all of those things. And then lastly, medical cannabis business tax decoupling. That is being thought of as either a credit, but really the way we would like to see it is potentially decoupling, or I know there's some middle ground. But yeah, we can discuss those 3 options. So please come ready to discuss those next time, along with follow-up items for this meeting. And yeah, unless there's anything else, yeah, Rich, go ahead.
Just one key we'll remind everybody about is the support staff at the MCPAB will do our best to make sure you have the homework material to study prior.
Yes.
And also part of that requires that we reach out to stakeholders and gather information. So stakeholders, you're on notice, will be reaching out. And I think one of the critical things for the board to know about is to have written statements potentially, or I think that's a good scenario, is to have written statements from stakeholders about how they feel about specific policies. If they have a specific recommendation that they'd like to recommend, to put it in writing, that makes it easier for the board to evaluate, right?
Yep.
If possible.
And I think both Matt and I will be fine with that. Pharmacists that I've spoken to this point have, at least given, an idea on one or more of these issues, because to have it in writing so everyone can see it together.
Right.
And as well as you guys reaching out. And to this point, Trevor has done a really good job with these presentations and gathering information. So yeah, hopefully we'll see a presentation on these items, but we will do our best to obviously get in touch with our constituents, as well,
Right.
to get their feelings on this. So it's not just, me and Matt up here, talking from our perspective.
And one thought would be to have handouts uploaded on our website at the latest a week before the meeting.
Yes.
And to make sure the board knows, okay, they're all up there and there's appropriate links so the board can then move forward.
Certainly, and I think it's part of what I talked to Brandon about when he and I spoke yesterday. When if Today it worked out well because we were just having discussion on some of those things.
Right.
But if they do want the board to take action on something, we'd love to see it at least a week in advance, so everyone can digest it, and we can discuss as needed, but. Okay, okay, well, I think with that, now I will entertain the most popular motion of the day.
So moved. Adjourn.
All right, it's non-debatable, and it is unanimous. So you're adjourned. Thank you.